Well, obviously there's unfortunately been limitations in Parliament that have not enabled me to come both to Auckland and then still to be able to be present and accountable, and of course running our response to the outbreak from Wellington. As soon as those measures lifted, I found the first available time to come home. Tamaki Makaurau is my home, and today has been really important for me to be able to reconnect with those who I've been keeping in contact with at a distance, business representatives, health providers, but also to have a chance to talk to Aucklanders about their experience. Of course, we'll make sure that we cover both. And so, of course, today was a chance to meet with not just one business, but actually business representatives who met me there, and of course we had a chance to have a longer form discussion. Before I met up with all of you, I took the chance to informally catch up with a few of those businesses who remain closed and who are opening today. But I will also be back. This will not be my only visit to Auckland. I will be coming home. I will take the opportunity to come back and continue to talk with those who have been affected throughout this pandemic. I mean, look, there is no way that you can replicate from afar the experience of having been through this outbreak for its entirety. And one visit doesn't replicate that either. But throughout, I've remained in contact with business representatives, with our health response, and of course, with my family and friends to give me that insight into what it's been like to be working from home, to have the kids at home. All of that gives me an insight. At the same time, I've got to balance all of those competing demands, the economic interests, but also the health interests of the country. And I believe we've got the balance right in the decisions that we've made. Through every decision that we've made, and keep in mind, all of our Auckland cabinet have remained in Auckland throughout and have been part of all of the decision making all the way through. But I believe that we have continued to strike the balance all the way through of making sure that we are looking after people's health and well-being, but also making evidence-based decisions that set us in the best position possible for the long run. Well, it wasn't formal, just informal settings. And again, I will be back. Of course, today, unfortunately, is a shortened program because of APEC demands. But equally, we have maintained contact with hospitality representatives all the way through. We know how tough it's been. And the light is at the end of the tunnel. We will see reopenings in the very near future as Auckland starts to hit those targets. It was nothing formal. And nor do I wish to overstate just those informal interactions. But my point, of course, that I'm making is that I will be back. And all the way through, we have continued to maintain contact with those who have been most gravely affected by the restrictions, whether it's been in person or at a distance. Of course, keep in mind that for the most part, restrictions have meant we've had to hold those meetings at a distance. It wasn't necessarily on the issue of boosters. I mean, that was really just touching base around what the process is from here. So that was more of an exchange of information more than anything. And of course, as you'll know, we've gazetted MedSafe have made the first step in that decision. We've got one more step, and when that decision is made, we are ready to go. We have vaccinators, we have the vaccines, everything is in place to roll out. Look, for managed isolation, the business owner in question, yes, raised with me issues that we are aware of. And as I said, we are moving into a new phase of our response now, already trialling self-isolation, and in the new year expecting to use that much more broadly, which will take the pressure off our border system. Look, I'm not going to speak on behalf of what protesters were seeking, but nor do I change my view. Everyone's entitled to their opinion on the motives of yesterday. But I stand by the fact that ultimately the vast majority of New Zealanders have gone out and been vaccinated, have worked really hard to protect one another, and it's to them I want to send my thanks. Of course, with the time available, making sure that I try and touch base with business representatives. So, of course, when we were organising the visit, the question was, where would you like to meet? And that particular visit we were part of was at their suggestion. And then, of course, we wanted to touch base with those who have been part of the health response here. But, of course, this is my home. And so I will naturally be back, and I hope in the not too distant future. But I will be back. And to say that one visit is going to enable me to get a cross-section of all of those views, we've had to use multiple ways to hear from business representatives throughout. I would never expect to be able to do that in a matter of a few hours. That is not an accurate reflection. Cabinet has already set down that we have additional milestones for decision making on a range of different workforces who have been seeking clarity. The police will be considered alongside those.
Just what
information that I have, I expect that it will be a relatively small number. But that's something that perhaps Minister Hipkins might be able to answer for you, and of course he's up at the podium at one. As I said, we wanted to make sure, because of course it's just my first visit, that we had a chance to touch base with business representatives who represent businesses across Auckland. So said, look, time is yours, what would you like to do? We met with a member business informally. Of course I was aware of my time, so that was restricted, so I tried to of course drop in to a couple of my locals. But as I say, I will be back. My question was, is that your view? I am very publicly available, and of course it's a little bit obviously difficult in a level 3 setting. I've got to make sure that I'm following the rules like everyone else. It's not a campaign trail where I simply wander around a mall setting. I do have to be mindful of following restrictions. It does make it a little harder just to have those interactions informally. I've seen some reporting, and look, we don't take any decision around mandates lightly. And if they were very thoroughly considered, whether it was health or education, and in both cases, very strong reasons why we chose to use mandates. For education, we have a large group of our population and children that cannot be vaccinated. So the next best thing we can do is make sure that those in close contact with them for long periods of time are vaccinated to keep them safe.
Just one more question.
And there I would just say, of course, we reach out, do share with us if you're experiencing those issues. We have for past mandates at our border, we have had often issues of whether or not, because of workforce not wanting to be vaccinated, it would, for instance, cause knock-on issues. We actually, through working alongside those employees, in many cases have managed to overcome their concerns, and they have ultimately been vaccinated. We want to support those schools, work alongside them, and hopefully see their workforce be vaccinated. Well, actually still what we're seeing are, for the most part, very high rates of vaccination amongst our Pacifica community, and a huge thank you to everyone who has been vaccinated. We're looking at 80 across the board, 87% first dose, and in the Auckland metro area, really good rates. And so I would say actually thank you. Yes, we want to though keep aiming for those 90% figures as a milestone. So very grateful that the work continues on the ground. So as I say, we have seen very high rates in our Pacific community, and I put that down to the amazing leadership, the work that's been done within community. Of course, we want to keep making sure that we're reaching everyone who's eligible. But at the same time, the rates are high. We have chosen the things that we are easing first are the lowest risk things. So retail and gatherings outdoors, we're confident that we can continue to keep people safe while we ease.
A lot of those
and it's why we have set a target for ourselves that is so high. That target would enable us to be one of the most vaccinated countries in the world, and we do want that for our people, because as you say, those who are in hospital now, the majority are not fully vaccinated, and we want to prevent that. We want to prevent illness. We want to prevent people losing their lives. Talk to someone you know. There will be someone in your circle of friends or whānau who may have had the same questions as you. Seek them out, talk about your concerns, or find a health professional you trust. But please do not wait. I want to make sure that we protect you before the virus finds you. Never, regardless of who I visit, I would never judge everyone's circumstance from a handful of conversations. That's why we try and make sure that we stay in touch as well with those business representatives. What I was hearing, though, is a general sense that people can see what's on the horizon now, that with the easing of restrictions today, with retail reopening, and with us giving that very strong signal of an expectation that we will move shortly into the new COVID protection framework, that is when all business can open and they will have certainty. Factoring in, of course, what we're seeing beyond Auckland's border. So because of the boundary That's why we've been able to look at moving Auckland sooner than the rest of the country. But we have to be mindful of vaccination rates and other factors outside of Auckland as we make these decisions. But, of course, we've given a firm commitment. Aucklanders will be able to reconnect with family and friends at Christmas and for that summer period. We'll be announcing the date that will be able to occur next week. And as we've said, there's two competing interests here. Aucklanders' desire, and rightfully so, to move. They have done the hard work. We absolutely need to give them the ability to start reconnecting with others, and that border cannot stay forever. Of course, at the same time, the rest of New Zealand wants to know that we're putting in place measures to slow the spread of COVID. So we will be making sure in our announcements that we balance those two things. Of course, throughout this pandemic and through this outbreak, we've needed to have a sense of that all the way through, helped of course by the fact that a large portion of our cabinet have been here the whole time. They've been part of that decision making, they've helped us design the packages to support business, and we've also stayed in close touch with business representatives here in Auckland as well.
It's a personal question.
Today is, tamaki makoto, Auckland is my home. Because Auckland is my home, my friends and family are here. My friends and family work in many different businesses and different organisations who have been affected by COVID as well. That's the nature of being in politics in New Zealand. We will all have connections, whether it's in our professional lives or our personal lives, and each gives you an insight of just how hard it has been here. I would never speak on anyone else's behalf, but some of the sentiment I picked up is people, of course, can see that we are easing restrictions, and that's clear today. Retail reopens, and we've given that strong expectation that of the 29th November decision, our expectation that we'll be in a position to be able to move into the COVID protection framework, and that gives businesses certainty they have been looking for. Look, one thing I would say is New Zealand is not alone. Around the world, of course, through this pandemic, we've had people who, of course, have taken a different perspective. Here in New Zealand, it has not represented the majority. Of course, though, it is still important that within the rules, people are able to have their concerns heard and raised. We are a democratic country. But of course, we hope that will always be in a safe way and in a non-violent way. Yes, I did meet with Phil Goff. And again, trying to use the time today to meet with those who can represent a wide range of views and give their insight. A really helpful discussion, which centred both on the well-being of Aucklanders, but also, of course, what he's observed on behalf of Auckland businesses as well. Really, we cast forward. I think he was aware of the plans that we have to make sure that we are moving forward. And so we talked a little bit about actually what happens next, what happens to ensure that we have a strong recovery for Auckland and acknowledge all of the hard work of Aucklanders. Of course, we will have an ongoing vaccination campaign, of course, I expect for boosters. And equally, we have to maintain the ability to vaccinate those who may choose to be vaccinated later. And equally, we also have to be ready to be able to vaccinate should the decision be made to vaccinate children, 5 to 11-year-olds. So there will be no lack of availability and access for people to continue to be vaccinated beyond
taking the foot off the pedal?
Well, beyond the 90% milestone. So no, that we will continue to be eager to vaccinate as many as we can. Of course, the scale will be determined by how many we're still trying to reach. Okay, so as a general rule, I don't talk about the briefs that I receive that relate to national security and intelligence. But what I can say is that none of the protocols that we usually have particularly changed as a result of what we've seen at present. Personally, not something I could comment on, just because the responsibility at a level for MPs and others sits elsewhere, so that's not something I could comment on. We will, of course, make sure that we're doing all we can to keep our people safe, but I'll start with the same message that this whole pandemic started with. Regardless of your views, regardless of your position, there's a place for everyone's voice to be heard. Please just make it kind. Be kind to others, even if they take a different perspective from you. Everyone ultimately wants the best for their community. Thanks, everyone.